everyone, I'm Jocelyn Cocchi, and the tutorial I'd like to share with you today is for an early intermediate level recital piece called The Dark Phantom. So The Dark Phantom comes from a collection called Another Pinch and a Stronger Dash, which are all ranging from early to mid intermediate level. So The Dark Phantom would be at the lowest end of this scale, so around about first grade level in the Australian and New Zealand grading system, and second grade in the ABRSM system, which is widely used through Asia and the UK. So what makes this such an effective recital piece is that it sounds really impressive to play, but it's not that difficult to learn. So it makes a good show-off piece, has its challenges. It wouldn't be a good pedagogical study if it didn't, but all in all, it's fairly straightforward and quite manageable for students at that level. So without further ado, I'll play through The Dark Phantom and then I'll go through the teaching process. So that's The Dark Phantom. The way that I would start to teach this is to use the opportunity to read all of these notes that are outside of the stave. I've got a subtitle for this piece, which is the D song, D for Dark Phantom and D for Dark Purple, which I use a colouring system for teaching note reading. I've got a system called Colour Play, which I have a primer for, which uses a different colour specifically for each note, and by the students working out what the notes are in advance and colouring them themselves, they then develop a visual connection with the notes. So with this piece, there are a lot of Ds throughout, and I wouldn't tell the student that there are a lot of Ds throughout. I would let them find that out for themselves. So if they're counting down and working out that first note in the left hand, which is underneath the stave, they're going to work out that's D, rather than them having to learn that once and then forget about it, and then the next time they play it they have to go through the learning process again, working it all out. I would have them colour that D dark purple, and then they know that that is low D. So in teaching that, we would go through the left hand, they're going to play there, and then they can see they've got the D on the bottom again, but they're skipping a space and going to the next space. So they've got a fifth or a handspan. The next bar, just different rhythms, but the same fifth that they're playing. In the next line, they're moving, so they need to read that note. And once they've read that and worked that out, that they can work out that that is another D, and they can highlight that D. And they can play that and find that that's higher on the stave. They're going to slide into the black keys for the B flat, then back down, and their hand stays in that position to play the A. And now they've got to go to the bottom of the stave, so I would have them colour that note red for A, apple red, and then they know where that is, they're going to their thumb. And then from there they're going to skip a note and go back to the low D again. Now what the students will often do is to play straight down those notes. So they will have because that's what comes most naturally to them. They can see that it's going down there and that's where they want to go. It's hard for students to develop a linear connection across two systems. So if you guide them to see that that note finishes on a space and then the next note at the beginning of the next system is also on a space, they can see they need to skip a note. They're not going straight down. And then this is like the beginning. Up to the second finger on G, which is all very easy. But when it comes to the next system, of course, they also again lose that linear connection. So they've just got a whole bunch of new notes on the next line. So what I would have them do is colour that G at the end of the third system, green for G, and then colour the first note on the bottom of the following system. They can see that that is again a G. They are skipping a line and going to the next line. So they again have a fifth. So they've changed hand positions on that note. Now here they're going to A, but they need to move to the third finger, back to there, and they've got the same note again, but changing finger, and this time they can go all the way down. Now I wouldn't take any more than that to begin with. If you take that with the left hand, and then you can go back and teach the right hand and get that page together pretty much straight away. So going over the right hand, the first thing they're going to notice, or that you need them to notice, is that it starts in the bass. That's quite a complicated concept at this level. What I would say for that is that this is a note that, because it's in the bass, you've got to read this the way you would read the left hand. So perhaps just shut out the lower stave so that they can visualise that as a left hand stave. And then when they've worked out the note, which is D, you can say, well, now you're going to play that with your right hand. So they're going to play this D, same pattern as what we had in the left hand. Now we're moving into the treble, so they're back where they can read normally. It's all fitting very comfortably under the fingers. Now here, the student will just see another chord and they will take their hands away and want to do different fingering, whatever they may do. What you want them to do is to know that they don't need to move their hand position at all. They can just slide their thumb into that C sharp. So you might need to go over that a few times. Then on to the third line, they're back into the bass again. Sliding into the B flat. Now again, we're going to lose the linear connection to find the next chord, and it just looks like another random chord somewhere. The only thing that's in common is the top note at the end of the third line is a B flat, and there's a B flat in the middle of the following chord. So perhaps they can colour that B flat B, blue for B, and also the middle note, they can see what's the same, that B flat stays. They've got the G on the bottom and they've got effectively a triad with that B flat in the middle. Then in the next chord, the top note stays the same, so it's wise for them to notice that too, so that can also be coloured. Or they can colour it, they should always do the colouring themselves. So from there, they're going to drop the two bottom notes down, so the second finger's in the right place, but the thumb has to drop. Second finger's where it needs to be, the thumb's where it needs to be, and they can drop the thumb down again for that final chord. Okay, so that's the first page. I wouldn't take any more of that for the moment. The way I do this is to play the right hand while the student plays the left hand. We go over it about 3 times and then swap over, and the student plays the right hand while I play the left hand a few times. And then the student should be ready to put it together. Now, a lot of the patterns, such as moving between registers, the student will now understand and won't need to be reading them. They can pretty much follow what they already know, what they have learned. So putting that together, Walking, moving up a register. Sliding into the black keys. Now the problem that is going to arise here is that the student will want to hold these notes while they find where they're going. So they want to give them a dotted crotchet value each. So what I think you should do is phantom, phantom rides again. So put some words in. I use words for everything. I'll put the words that I normally use for this into the notes at the end of this piece, or into the comments. The words I have for the rhythm are black in the moonlight, the phantom rides. And words for songs like this should be repetitive, very repetitive, because if the student has to focus on a lyric that chops and changes all the way through, then they're focusing more on the lyric than they are on the actual piece of music. So the words are designed to help them manage the rhythm, so the words need to be relevant to the rhythmic pattern. No good having stop kind of words or words that force a stop if you're going to have an onward flowing, a running type of melody. So if you've got something like, you can stop on there, so you can have a long vowel there or a long sound there, like phantom rides, black in the moonlight, the phantom rides. You can have galloping, galloping, phantom rides or something, just anything that actually moves along and keeps the student moving. So with this section on the second line where it's phantom rides again, and that will help the student to keep that in time. So moving on to the third line. Now into the B flat. Now here's a change of position. So if the student has done their work separate hands, they will know that they have to just change that position in the left hand over and change the position in the right hand. Now the second problem we come to is in the second last bar of that page. Excuse me. The student needs to lift to change the left hand note to a thumb, and then the left hand needs to continue to connect. The right hand needs to lift to change that chord, and then again here. So what the student will want to do is this. And put the notes down at the same time. It's more convenient to change at the same time. It's quite complicated to have one hand changing while the other one connects. It's kind of like, you know, rub your tummy and pat your head kind of a thing. But that's what they need to do. So the left hand lifts, and as it plays the repeated note, the right hand lifts, and then the right hand comes down with the next left hand note, which is connecting. Right hand lifts. So I'll do that again. Left hand lifts, right hand lifts as that plays, and then down, up. Sometimes it's helpful to write little rests into the other hand to shorten the note value, and write a little rest in, like a quaver rest at the end of that second last bar in the right hand, so that the student knows to lift, that they need to lift to repeat that chord. Otherwise they'll be trying to do something that connects. Okay, so the second page is going to be the most difficult page of the whole piece. It has a lot of patterns though, a lot of repetitions, so it's once those difficulties are worked through, it's pretty much mastered. The left hand's not really a problem. Those are all in fifths, so we have midnight to dawn, the phantom rides, the dark phantom rides. Dropping a third into the black keys, up one, and up 1. So that's not so difficult, it's quite straightforward. The right hand though is in 6ths, coming down 1 and then dropping to a 5th. That's going to be tricky because they only have a quaver to move from the 6th to the 5th. What they will want to do to hold on to that last 6th so that they can think about where they're going. So what I do is make an exercise out of it. You know, maybe it's the trumpets calling the dark phantom. Then once they have mastered that, the next section is fine under the fingers, but the following bit, we don't really want them to go to 1 and 2 on there because then we can't connect to the C, and that's going to be the impulse there, so they need to change to 2 and 3 so that they can connect into the thumb. So that whole line now the left hand finishes off the melody there and the right hand has a little "He rides again." So putting that bit together, you're going to have a problem where it changes to the 5th. So this is where you need to do the work. So long as you've got the words "Midnight to Dawn, the Phantom Rides," then the student at least knows how it's meant to sound, even if they can't quite make it happen to begin with. He rides again. Now the second line is pretty much identical, except that the right hand finishes off the melody and the left hand has the little "He rides again" at the end. So with that rhythm, rides, he rides again. If you have the words, it's going to help them to hold that first note a little longer, and then he rides again. Third line. So that's the same as the first line and the last line. A slightly different ending. Now over the page, we've got another opportunity for reading those Ds, so they can see the first one is high on the treble stave, but it's written with an 8 VA, so it's an octave higher than written. Now, the next bar is the left hand, but it's in the treble. So again, guide the student to read that as though they were reading the right hand. You might need to shut out the top stave so that they can see that with more relevance. So to read that as though they were reading the right hand, but they're going to play it with the left hand. Then the next bar is the right hand at its normal pitch, and then the left hand in its normal place. Now, once the student has gone over that once, they have worked out, and they probably have already, from hearing you play it, know that it's going to be crossed over with the hands just moving down the registers. So that won't present any difficulty. And then they're back down to the beginning again. So this is all the same as the first page. Now the difference here is that it is written differently. At the beginning, it's written with the right hand staying in the bass so that the connection from the bar before, where this was written with the right hand in the bass, moves on to still have the right hand in the bass for the next line. On the repeat, I've changed it around so that they're actually reading a change of clef at that point, so same notes but differently written. So after this, they're changing clef, so it gives another opportunity to read notes outside of the ledger lines. So they've got, if they're reading from the bottom, which I always have all my students reading from the bottom, they can work out that they've got a triad, but they have to work out all the way down. But they're going to read that top note first anyway, which is a D, skip down to B flat, skip down to G. They can see that it's a triad that's built up to the D. And just a couple of little extra notes on the end there before the coda. Now the coda, the left hand is exactly the same. The right hand is playing in an inversion. So where we had the G minor triad here, we're taking the B flat on the bottom, the G on the top. So they're playing a sixth, and then in the next bar they're moving down one note. The fourth finger is already in place for that E, and I would have them highlight that E so they can see that the bottom note of the next chord is still the E, but just being taken with the thumb so that we can move up. And then the middle note stays, or the top note stays the same for the middle of the next chord. So that last line together. Same problems here with having to lift and connect. Okay, so that is the Dark Phantom essentially. There's not really any requirement for it to be pedalled. A lot of students at this level won't really have learnt much pedalling, so they don't need to pedal this. I like all my students to pedal, and they pedal from a very early level. And they can really, even if you wanted to just introduce a little bit of pedalling, you could do something like, starting off with the pedal down for the beginning, and then those notes, and lift. And you could, even if you just did that, it would get them used to using the pedal. And then maybe even after, like if you had pedal down, up, and then while they've got time there, they could have the pedal down here and then lift it. There are loads and loads of different ways that the pedal can be used in this. I'm going to do a demonstration of the way that I would most usually teach the pedal to my students, but you can simplify it according to what your own students can manage. Down, up, down, change, change, up, down, change, change, up, down, up. Down, up, down, change, change, up, down, change, change, up, down, up, down, up, down, change, up, down, up. Now in that section there is, some of my students can manage a little bit more pedalling in this, so I might have change, 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 up. But that's quite complicated pedalling at this level. So I think if you stick to, for those that can manage it, change, up, up, down, up, down, up. It's more manageable. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Change, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and down. Change, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, change, change, up, down, change, change, up, down, up. Okay, so I hope that you have found that a useful tutorial if you are teaching the Dark Phantom. If you have not used the Dark Phantom yet, then I hope you find this a useful addition to your teaching library. And I am always available for questions if anyone is having any problems or needs any other strategies for teaching this.